Hey everybody, this is Josh Miramant, CEO of Blue Orange Digital, joined again by my esteemed colleague, William Huard.
Thanks,
Great to
Josh.
have you back, William.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to
Yeah,
do another one of these.
yeah, these are always really fun. A couple reasons. We today are diving right into a very timely topic of how to train LLMs. We're actually going to dive in and walk through a RAG training of an LLM live in the Databricks platform, which we're really excited about. And like last time, we are going to talk about kind of how we are able to leverage these tools. We'll talk about LLMs today after kind of second installment after talking about Databricks Unity Catalog last time. But once we have all our data prepped, and let's look at a real example of what we can do with it. So I'm going to dive in a little bit on how to think about using these tools for business value. And then William's actually going to take us through and walk us through an example in real time of RAG training a LLM model. So
Yeah, I know RAG is a term out there that people might see a lot, which also stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. So, can you tell us a bit about what is RAG?
yeah, of course. I feel like every day we have to learn a new acronym. Originally it was just in consulting, and now it's in tech.
Yeah.
So it's LLMs, RAG. We get all these fun ones. But yeah, retrieval and augmented generation. So to be honest with you, this doesn't have to be too complex. There's kind of a range of ways to think about how we get the outputs or the what generative content from LLMs and Gen AI. There are a few different common ways of doing it. First off, there's been a lot of discussion around thinking about like prompt engineering and how you ask of
Yep.
things. But there are a lot of downsides to that. You're still not really able to provide context other than that prompt window, which has a lot of constraints. So as you go further back, RAG is kind of that next layer in the axon between complexity and kind of improvement or contextualization. And so what you're doing with RAG training is effectively taking a bunch of proprietary data and really creating a database called a vector database in this way. But that is just storing the data in a way that's able to make it really easy for an LLM to interact with before it produces a response. So the LLM still has all the same underlying training information and is based on all the very very expensive training that these systems that were the Anthropics and the OpenAIs and
Yeah.
Amazon's and Microsoft are all investing in. It's still the same model, but before it produces a response, it's going to check in with this vector database. And the vector database is just encoded all of our data in a way that makes it really easy for the model to check in and then effectively tweak the results to be contextualized to that amount of information. So if you think about it, it's actually this really helpful context from my perspective. I'm just going to share a little a diagram here. There's kind of like resourcing or level of effort and how good they get, in certain ways, all the way to complexity. And so as you move up the spectrum here, you have prompt engineering, which is just asking good questions. Then you move to RAG, which is how we're talking about. We'll walk through the example. Requires proprietary data. There's definitely some technical know-how, but you're not actually like going in and changing the weights and the parameters that are used to train the model. The next layer down is fine tuning, which you're really looking at the kind of end of the cycle of training the model. And this is when you actually change the weights. So the LLM will recontextualize how it thinks, its language, if you will. That instead of just understanding all corpus of human language trained on whatever data sets, the big tools, you actually retrain the weighting for potentially proprietary insights like your own language. If you have a healthcare or engineering specs that are very specific, fine tuning will start to be required. And then the most complex and really something that most businesses really don't need to think about too much is custom training a model. That's a foundation model. This is what we're seeing with the advent of everyone seems to release a new model every day now. That's the most in-depth and costs millions of dollars, and why NVIDIA is the most valuable GPU company in the world is really training around that custom trained layer. Certainly all of these require compute, but less so as it gets back to just running a query against a trained model in the beginning.
So it sounds like for the most part, I think everyone would focus on maybe those first three layers, right? Whether that be prompt engineering or a RAG application with then some fine tuning, as opposed to let's have the open AIs, the Databricks, let's have them build the custom trained models, and then we can figure out as a business how to adapt those to our specific use cases.
I think that's a fair statement. I mean, when you're looking at business value around a lot of these, we're in an interesting time where LLMs have been around for a long time, but
Yeah.
the training data has gotten good enough to make them kind of very magical for, year, 18 months. So these foundation models are widely available. And the business value really should sit as in how little do you need to do to get value out of them. And so there's a couple, the higher the effort, the higher the business case needs, and then the potential
Of
business
course,
value
they
needs to
support
be.
that. Yep.
And so where I think about this, like if you can just use a foundational model, that's ideal. You want to start from, is there an environment where using just the context window? So what I'm excited about a lot of that option is SaaS products. So a CRM plugging in prompt, something where an LLM has context of data
Yep.
in the prompt window to then be getting value that's contextual to proprietary data sets. The next layer is RAG, which we'll walk through today. This is what a lot of people are doing. This is where there's a lot of business value. They're relatively simple. There certainly takes, spinning up this magical vector database and some of these other things, but it's much easier. Fine tuning starts to need a very specialized use case, and foundational training, there's just too much competition. That's rarely a spot that businesses use.
So in terms of using a RAG application, it sounds like the business case there is you have proprietary data that you would like to feed as context into your application to enhance its question answering capabilities.
Yeah, a couple things real quick. So it's just, I think the benefit to the businesses, and you nailed a couple, but it's really starting to think it's this cost effective implementation. Not too expensive. This is kind of that sweet spot of business value and customization, because LLMs are great, but they have a lot of problems too. They're not very smart, particularly when we're trying to solve proprietary solutions. Like you have email history or context of how you talk about stuff, or your corpus of enterprise knowledge. That's something that two factors. You need to be careful with that. It's proprietary sensitive data. So if you don't want to just give that out to every context window, that's shipping it off to an open model. You got to be careful around that. And then second is, thinking about how you reduce hallucinations. Models by design are just predicting the next word, and they can predict poorly often. That makes sense in the distribution of the likely outcome. Often a wrong answer looks right in many cases that isn't right in the one you're using of it. When you provide RAG training to a model, it does a really good job understanding the context of your business language, whether that be your email history, whether that be the acronyms and language that you use. And so it's going to considerably rank up the likelihood of the ones being the right answer, which reduces hallucination. So not only can you provide your proprietary data to a model that you own and retain in-house, but you also are able to improve the ability for it to be correct and contextual in a way that you could almost never get on a baseline foundational model with any amount of prompt training. You might be able to help some with context window training, but that's horribly inefficient and not really scalable across an organization.
But with that, not just do we have to think about those different use cases for those applications, but the models that you talked about earlier as well. There are tons of models being released every day. It seems like, right? Companies working on new ones, updating them, refreshing them. So in terms of thinking about what model should we use, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's just so much noise in the space, and I think that's wonderful. Good amount of competition. There are two big factors that you care about, and this is general application. If you're going into a specific application and you really need performance or something, there's testing, and it's easy to. We're actually walking through Databricks today, which makes it easy to have interoperability on these models. But there's two factors. One, are they good enough? And two, are they open or closed? And so are they good enough? We're getting in an ecosystem with so much hype that has been in this space that models are above a certain threshold. It's like the hype around Llama 3 right now. We're dealing with, there's Databricks, DBRX just released out. We have OpenAI models and how these all stand, which are phenomenal. Lots of options. We have Bedrock. There's training on models in Amazon. Microsoft has their own. There's lots. There will be more, and they're going to keep getting better. In the ballpark of the best performance models, they're all doing very good work. And a lot of what you need to do is just to make sure that you're providing the right proprietary data, you're querying it the right way, and things like RAG are done to contextualize. That's the most important factor for identifying a very specific business use case and building towards that use case. Yep. It's still, the LLMs and the generative output are still a platform that then need to be, curated and tuned to the specific business case. Second thing to note is open versus closed. We have very proprietary closed systems that we exist. The OpenAIs and the Anthropic models, those are very closed ecosystems. meaning they're proprietary models. You have no commercial licensing for them unless you're paying the company directly for each query. And they do have more open models, but on the other spectrum, and this is where we're using example on DBRX today. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yep.
DBRX with Databricks, Llama, they have a kind of open model. You got to be careful on which commercial applications you're using. But noting that you're using a model in open source, I've made this prediction, as many have. We're moving in a direction where that's going to become very competitive. These are just going to be commoditized and ubiquitous, but being very careful to build on top of a model that is open so you're able to use it. And I think that's a good transition to maybe showcasing a little bit, and we're actually working with DBRX. Part of why I think about not just focusing on a specific model, but building in a way that has interoperability and is kind of future-proof, so you can keep changing in different models as they grow, be able to RAG train and test. And I think that's why we wanted to showcase what Databricks is doing and how powerful this tool is for what it's really doing around the infrastructure, is setting up a series of tools that allow you to co-locate your data, co-locate that with your vector database, co-locate it with your model training environment, and even allow you to release kind of production outputs from it. That's the power that you're going to have for kind of future-proofing your development in this space, because there will be rapid development. So why don't we kick over and dive into kind of your use case that you worked through? And
as I pull that up here, there's actually a great way within Databricks to explore those different models. What model do I choose? What model do I start with? So actually inside of the machine learning playground, there is a super simple way in which there are models that are already natively inside of the platform. You can also bring in additional models. And as we see here, we have a few different foundational models from Mixtral to Llama, MPT. And what we can actually do is we can go ahead and expand this. And what this gives you the opportunity to do is you can go ahead and take a look at some of the different characteristics and also the inputs, outputs of these different models in one place.
Amazing. Right there.
They have some prompts that you can use. So for example, if we wanted to go ahead and let's take a look at the unstructured text parsing, you go ahead and plug those all in and you can start to see how these outputs are a little bit different. So for the DBRX and Mixtral, we see a very code-friendly, easy-to-read output. Whereas if we're looking at the MPT30, we see that this is more of a text-based output, not as easy to read as the other two. It gives you information on time to first token, the tokens per second that is going to run, in the total tokens. So at a very high level, it makes it very easy to dabble in some of the different models. You can even put in your own custom prompts if you want to, outside of the ones that are already loaded into the system.
Amazing. That's so handy for side-by-side comparison. And then I can only imagine how valuable that is going to be when we have additional models released that you want to test or benchmark.
Exactly.
Specific features that are coming about sub-model. I can imagine the playground is going to be an incredible place to look at that.
Definitely. And then the other place is inside of the marketplace. You can come here and start to take a look at what are all the models that are available.
Amazing.
Inside of the Databricks platform, you can see what their use cases are. It's going to give you the examples. It's going to give you a preview notebook if you want to jump into that. And you can take this and follow along with it if you were looking to do further work with this. So just really high level, it gives you a ton of access to the models that are out there. And it gives you a way to start to work with those to determine and pinpoint down what models might I want to work with to move forward with building an in-house solution.
It's amazing. Can you just click back to the marketplace? Something I think to note. And this is what the future is going to look like. Scroll down a minute. I think this is a great example. Just to touch right there, medical questions and answers from I think the perfect example where we're going to see a further developed like clinical notes and questions. This is the ability for models to be kind of, pulling Hugging Face models obviously is a great place to pull in, but like more tailored models that like one-click deploy, so you can not only do your custom training, but starting with more tailored models. Really cool to think the marketplace being so conveniently co-located with your development infrastructure. I just harken back to good design principles of software where you abstract each function of it. And, the best practices of ML ops are being deployed inside of Databricks. These are abstracted responsibilities for data science in ways that we've kind of learned over, decades of software engineering as well.
We'll do a quick jump into the notebook from the Databricks demo, which they do a great job at putting together these easy to follow along, easy to understand, to go from end to end if you wanted to develop, as we talked about, a RAG solution. As you mentioned before, if we have proprietary information, we could think of a lot of companies probably have PDFs on data that they work with. That could be whether that's around procedures in the medical industry or private equity firms and having pitch books or companies that they buy and sell or
You
deal
have
with.
all the SIMs, like confidential information memorandums from private equity, and how those are locked in, and PDF exports of PowerPoints. I mean, man, I think about the good, just unbelievable amounts of semi-structured data that exists, that making that way more convenient via an LLM. Oof, that's powerful.
So in this specific notebook, what Databricks is doing is they're downloading information that is Databricks specific, and they want to have an LLM chatbot that will answer questions specifically about the Databricks platform. So what will happen here is when we scroll down, our first step is we need to ingest the Databricks PDFs and extract their pages. And we need to break it down into smaller chunks and formats. So that way we can use that context, pair it with the question, and then take that, and that will return the answer.
Yep.
So then as we work down the notebook, what we'll see here is we're trying to develop those chunks to prepare us for the vector search index. And inside the Databricks platform as well, there are different use cases, whether you want a fully managed vector search index, whether you want a self-managed vector search index, or you want that direct search index. So obviously that'll depend on the different use cases that companies are looking to apply and what will make the most sense for their specific situation.
It's so nice to have, fully managed, if anyone's deployed a vector database, it's certainly a healthy amount of work to keep it managed to maintain. So fully managed is a nice option, but then also making sure for tuning for performance, design, and even potentially scale, you might need to have some custom tweaks. So cool to see the flexibility right there.
And so we move down to picking the foundation model, as we spoke about before, that will be used to create those embeddings. So taking each of those pieces of text, turning them into numbers. And as you'll see here, what we're doing is it's taking those embeddings and it's assigning vectors and numbers to those. So that way we can index it. And when questions and answers are happening, we have a way in which we can search our documents to get those relevant pieces of information.
When we're talking about machine readable, somehow that is.
Yeah.
Tokenization. Yeah.
So then what happens is we take those embeddings, we save them into the Delta table with the indexes. And what we can see here for each of those volumes, as we see even in these first two lines here, these are around the new approach to data sharing, both from the same PDF, but it's being broken down into multiple chunks. And then what we can see here is the content within this specific chunk here. And so what are the associated embeddings with that chunks? And then finally, we want to create that self-managed vector search index. So that way we can search against it. So it's going to create an endpoint that the system will be able to use to go ahead and send that information to, and retrieve it and then return it back to the LLM for further processing.
Clean. Nice to have that all co-located and with a lot of power. Like obviously the, familiar Jupyter notebook format that they have, that Databricks, designs everything on, but then you connect all this power with co-locating your data, having a pipeline and processing engine, having your vector database available, having multiple marketplace model tunings, and being able to plug that in and out right within it. Pretty powerful to think of all the abstraction, but then kind of ease of what you get by wrapping a, Jupyter notebook as the core place there.
So at this point, we can jump over to actually taking that chatbot, building it out using DBRX and LangChain to most efficiently use the information that you're looking to feed it. So as we see there on the left side here, that was the data preparation, the vector search index, the vector databases, getting it ready and creating an endpoint that we can read and write from. And then this part of the notebook is focused on let's build out that chatbot experience and give it its instructions. So as we go through here, what we'll see the purpose of LangChain is to really give that order of instruction, letting the LLM know we want to store information as context. We want to store the chat history also as context. As it's speaking with the user, it will be smarter and a more effective experience when you're using that, when it stores that context. So what we see off the bat is It's just the input is the question, and we have a small template here, which is you are an assistant, and to give it a short answer. And that's where we start from. And then what we're going to do is start to chain and build on that to make it smarter, to give it more context. So now what we can see here is we're going to add the history prompt instead of just the question and the short answer. And we're going to continue to build on that. And now we're getting to the point of let's add a filter so it will answer only those Databricks related questions. Or if we're talking about whether you're in the medical industry or private equity, this is where you can start to add those filters on what kind of information it should answer.
Man.
But what you can also do is there are ways in which you can limit what content users have access to. So if there are different departments within the company and there is private information that should only be going to certain parts of the company using this experience, you can also further filter that down as well.
So just so I understand, not only are we showcasing RAG training here, but then we're also providing a kind of a below the level context training to make sure that that contextual RAG information is being then queried in the appropriate way as well, and the underlying LLM. So we actually are working multiple stages of customizing a model for more efficacy here.
Exactly. Really what this is doing here within the notebook is it's building that out to be very specific with the prompt, but also understand you're feeding it the documents as context. You want to make sure that you're going to save the chat history as context as well. Now we want to take that and put it all together. These are all the endpoints that we have access to that we can use to power that chatbot experience or that LLM experience.
So these are the deployed versions of these effectively able to query against.
Yeah. So for this one, these are all different API endpoints. As we see here with the ones in Databricks with the logo there, those are the ones native within. And then if you see this little gray icon here, this will be for either external or custom endpoints that you've built. And you could also think about this as if you had OpenAI and they're in ChatGPT inside of you or another product. It'll give you a way to really to be able to tell quite easily between what is native in the platform versus which is external. And then you're able to go ahead and click into the different versions here.
Wow.
Take a look at those permissions, who can manage it,
Amazing.
who can do it, who can use it. So that's where you can then start to go within each
all the base foundations of ML ops right in there for control and access and integrated right in. That's amazing.
Yep. And so once you have that all set up, you can then take your model and deploy that as an endpoint. That gives you the opportunity to build that chat user interface and start sending those questions and answers in real time. This is the UI that they have here. And eventually they're going to have a way in which they're going to show you how to do this through the Lakehouse apps rather than just in line with the notebook. And then this gives you a simple way to start asking questions and seeing answers in a way that would simulate a production environment for that experience.
God, I'm just thinking about the power of we always call this like the data app emergence, where it's like, a little bit more flared and polished to put these things on consumer apps and make sure they're integrated. But for internal usage on proprietary data for business value, I mean, companies are going to have hundreds of these running, and easy ML ops infrastructure and management deployed on I think about like open source data tools like Radio or any internal integrating your own proprietary management into your own ERP or CRM. That's going to be so powerful with the ability to kind of deploy dozens of these on proprietary structures of data sets that's available.
So Josh, it was exciting to walk through the Databricks platform and show how easy it is to start utilizing the different models that we have access to and being able to measure maybe the performance of their outputs, and then actually even diving into a notebook to learn how do we take our proprietary data and then turn that into context that we can feed our model.
Yeah, it's what I see in here is the byproduct of billions of dollars of money flooding into this space. And if you think about 2023 as just this massive explosion of investment, what we're seeing in 2024 is a reduction in complexity and an ease of integration. And that's going to benefit a proliferation of business value, the ability for this to be very focused niche use cases that don't have to be massively expensive to scale a model out of many applications use cases, and something that's scalable, and you're getting hallucination reduction, and you're getting considerations and patterns that are emerging, try to think about security, and even observability functions, so you can track to make sure that, didn't get into it today, but drift and validation and
Yep.
performance and cost control cooked right into these systems. You're seeing the billions of dollars of flow by a leading platform like Databricks. So really exciting to see this year be the kind of rubber meets the road of LLMs being commoditized and driving considerably higher value out of how it can be actually applied in business. So really appreciate you walking us through this today, William.
Yes.
Really exciting to see. And we'll come back with a part 3 here and showcase a little bit more detail on some of the more nuanced parts of how we can kind of do some of the observability and features around managing these things.